Well, hi everyone, and welcome to ArtsFest Online and to this evening's talk with writer Natasha Carthew. Natasha will be chatting about her recently published memoir, Undercurrent, with Dr. Lisa Blower and Dr. Rob Francis, both from the creative writing team here at the University of Wolverhampton. Just a quick reminder that the event is being recorded, so please don't share any confidential information in the chat or the Q&A. So with all that said, welcome everyone, and over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone. Huge thanks for people for tuning in this evening. It means a lot to us for you to share your time with us. As Claire said, we're delighted to have Natasha Carthew with us today, this evening even, to chat about her excellent and beautifully written memoir Undercurrent, which shares quite a lot of the research and passions that Lisa and I have, and the creative and professional writing team at the University of Wolverhampton sort of focus on, I suppose. It deals with the working classes, it deals with the sense of place, it deals with the way that landscape and the natural environment weave themselves in and out of our sense of self and our identities, and is a piece of really interesting and really curious, and I would say overlooked cultures in the UK as well. So Natasha, thank you for joining us. What I would like to do first of all is hear some sections or a section from the book itself. So I'll pass over to you to introduce us to Undercurrent, and then we'll start a conversation.
That's brilliant. Cheers, Rob. Well, thank you for inviting me today, and to Lisa and the University of Wolverhampton. Yeah, Undercurrent is my memoir, as you say, and it's the first time I've really kind of dug deep into my past. And you know, in fiction writing, poetry, you pick at bits. It's all like little kind of nuggets, little golden nuggets, and you're like a magpie and you pick these bits and you put them into your fiction. But with memoir, it's all there, it's everything. So it's quite fun to just have you know your life behind you, and you just think, okay, what am I going to focus on? And for me, it was immediately going to be about the first memories, which is kind of like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, up until the age of 19, when I left the village where I live in Undercurrent, which is what the book is about, basically. So I think I'm going to start reading from the prologue, which is Ebb, just to give you a kind of a feel of what the book is about and what the village where I grew up, Downderry in Cornwall, is about. So yeah, just a couple of minutes and then we can get chatting. Prologue, Ebb. The overwhelming ocean is in constant motion when you are a child. The stink of seaweed and salt, and the way wet grit and earth smell at the end of a full tide storm. The crash of waves as you sleep, and the sound of a soft intake of breath as it retreats. There's a Cornish saying that nothing is left behind in an autumnal tide. The powerful tug between the sun and the equator makes the water surface stronger, and it pulls and builds until we are left with what are known as great tides. As I stand here on my childhood beach in my 40s, all I can see is the stretch of grey rocks and the serpent-scarred sand where the ebb has come and gone, and the overshadowing feel of the village behind me, that sense of being looked upon. Downderry stretches all along the butt edge of this part of the bay, a juxtaposition of old and new, rich and poor, of pretty fishermen's cottages that line the coastal street, and the bullying millionaire houses that dominate the high north and easterly hills with their balconies, glass walls and swimming pools. It is the village I grew up in. The soft sift and drift of the tide of my childhood seemed always to be at that outgoing phase. No matter how I stood and reached for the water, it always stretched and stopped just out of grasp. Draw slow, painful, retreating towards other continents and versions of me that I thought I would never get to see. I would never be a traveller. moving beyond the confines of my small world to the expanses beyond. And I would never be that writer, never be one of those names I traced on the covers of the books borrowed from the mobile library, the Lifeline books. My destiny was sunk so deep in poverty that I would never have the opportunity to explore. This is what they told me, what the teachers said with their tuts and whispers, and what the parents of the posh kids who lived in those big houses up on the hill said with their titters, that their kids didn't play with poor kids, no matter how rich those kids were in heritage, how wealthy they were in the colour and depth of nature, the pleasure of simple, wild knowledge. I stand here now with the sea spray on my face and the rhythm of the receding waves in my ears. And I wonder what it was about that quiet, abiding girl that snapped and kicked until, over time, she became this. Not a slim shadow of her former self, but a big, punchy, radiant light. What was it about the small world around me that made me want to reach out and tear a hole in its fabric? Not content to accept my place at the poverty table. When was the moment that I decided to stretch my thinking further than what I could see, beyond what was expected of me? There is still a part of me that hates this village. How each house and path and landmark holds some catch-breath memory as I walk the 2-mile-long coastal road that connects Seaton to Downderry end to end. Memories that are embedded in every foundation, every step. The places I grew up and the places my father, his parents and their families were born, lived and died. Our initials still scratched in concrete in each and every footing, but built over now with extensions, double driveways, patios. The road is the same, but the buildings are higher, and the pockets of green between each house have been paved. The trees where we used to play in front of our flat replaced by 2 big houses. The fields that surround the upper reaches of the village are no longer a sea of green and umber, but glimpsed tufts of what used to be. The swathes of gold that was our daffodil field, a dead memory. Nothing left of it but 2 neat borders of yellow in the front garden of a solitary oversized house, sitting heavy upon sacred land, and my breaking heart as I walk to keep myself on track. Past the shop on the left and the butcher's that's now a house on the right. The working men's club that has been renamed and rebranded for the blow-ins as a soulless village hall. Then finally down the dog shit covered path that passes the pub and the wall where we working class kids used to sit and drink and think about the purpose of all this, us. All those lonely hours that I walked this same stretch of hoary sand, a notebook in my hand trying to write the things I didn't yet understand, the anger that was around me, in me, the glimmer of who I could be, forever catching at the corner of my eye, that light of hope magnificent, then snuffed out with the crash down to the sea that was this cold grey peninsular place, reality, scraping by, penury, scarcity of food, fuel in the freedom of simply being yourself without the dusting off, the oh well, the getting on with things simply to survive, get by. As a young girl, I knew that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life cleaning holiday homes, and I certainly didn't want to marry a farmer. If anything, I wanted to be a farmer. But in Cornwall in the 80s, that dream was strictly reserved for boys, sons of landowners. I was gay, a tomboy, different from all the other girls. I was ambitious, headstrong, and although I was a young kid, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I knew there was something out there worth fighting for, if I could just find it. My saving grace was the natural world, and every day the nature that surrounded and imprinted on me was dissected and copied down into my notebook. Words to keep me safe, keep me hidden in the tangle of hedgerows and rock pools. I have returned to Downderry to write this, the same way a hand returns to a scar and a finger traces the outline of thin, damaged skin. Curiosity is that kid wondering, and before you know it, the thing you don't understand starts bleeding. There you go.
Beautiful. That is such a fascinating, beautifully written opening to the memoir that is constantly trying to grasp and grapple things that are slippery and tricky to trace, and coming from a voice that's trying to that sort of well, the way in which you reuse your childhood voice, I suppose, is trying to grapple with what's yet to come as well. And I think all of those things weave in the different voices of the work beautifully. But that prologue sets us up with all of those curious questions so nicely. Before I get started with the proper questions, let me just say, if anybody in the audience has got any questions for Natasha or any comments that might prompt further discussions for us, then please just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will monitor that and shout up whenever we see a ping. So let me ask you to start with, Natasha. Hopefully fairly simple question. Why write a memoir? Why now?
It's just, I think a lot of the things, because I've been, the work I do with my other hat on as an artistic director of Working Class Writers Festival, it makes me think about our stories as writers, and also our our legacy going forward, because a lot of the time our books are published, but it's not always our stories. And I kind of realized that I wanted people to know my story, as opposed to me just being kind of upfront leading the charge. I wanted to show the charge from childhood, because I want my life to be represented. I want young people to be represented, I suppose. So when they read this memoir, because it's up to the age of kind of 19, 20, I want young people to think, okay, my life was very similar to that, or just, growing up in poverty or growing up in rural isolation. It was really important that it's a book that others can read and think, okay, you've done it, I can do it, type thing. So it's kind of a writery as well, because I want young writers to think, not take no for an answer, not take that, when your teachers or whoever used to say, you're not going to amount to much, which a lot of working class writers or working class people are told at school for different reasons. Just because if you're poor, it's like, well, you're not going to be a writer because poor people aren't writers. So I wanted something that I could kind of hold up and say, look, I've done it, you can do it. My whole career as a writer, people know I'm a writer, they've read my fiction or poetry, but it's for me to say, okay, this is how I did it. And it was a hard journey, but I wanted that something to put into hands of younger people as well.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful idea. And it definitely comes across as well, because like I say, I mean, it's more than just a memoir in lots of ways, isn't it? This book, it's a piece about place. It's a piece about class. It's as much about, it's in some sense it's a political kind of polemic or social comment as much as it is about you and your life and your experience.
It was really important. It was really important that we had that meshing of what happened to me, obviously my story, and that's the memoir, with what's changed. When I set out to write it, that was up front and center for me. I wanted to know what has changed with rural isolation, what has changed with infrastructure, with travel, with food, all these things, all these kind of, we all know that these things go on, and especially in rural areas. And whilst I write it from a Cornish perspective, there's people from Cumbria, people from Norfolk, and everyone in between says, this is a similar story, the way that we have all been priced out of these beautiful areas that people like to visit. And, like I make a joke about, people come down on Cornwall and they go to the same towns and they all bump into each other. They all know each other. And it's because you've literally all decamped from London and you've all just gone to the same, you've all turned up in Panstow, and it's just like, because the locals can't afford to live there. It's like theme parks. They go and work there and then they have to go home again.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really like about what you're kind of writing about here is the fact that you are shining a spotlight on perhaps what is the facade, the holiday veneer of what we know as Cornwall. And when we think about Cornwall, I mean, you said in your prologue, you called it about the bullying millionaire homes. And it is this paradox, isn't it, constantly, that I think that of that exists between kind of nature's riches of, you know, what Cornwall is so famous for, and then this kind of economic deprivation that the tourists just don't see. But, you know, a little bit like Kerry Hudson with Lowbourne, going back to the towns that she grew up in, just to see if they were as lonely and deprived as she remembered them. This is kind of what you're doing, isn't it? You're kind of going back to your past and going and finding that actually nothing has changed.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to do that, because, you know, you're just curious, as you know, Lisa, as writers, we're curious to know where the changes are, and if they have changed, if they haven't changed, and if they haven't, you know, we're like, well, that's, you know, that's really bad, because I'm talking about the 80s here. There's a kind of quite a long time ago, and what has changed. In many ways, you know, we did have a council house. People don't have a council house now in the village, or they've all been sold in the village where I come from. So, and most villages, and that's across the country. So, you know, people have been priced out of literally everywhere and everything. Yeah.
It is. It's that kind of second home council tax that's going on in Gwynedd at the moment. You know, I just know people that live up in Abersoch, and they're in exactly that kind of same position. But also writing about it, you know, using their kind of prose and poetry to shine a spotlight on what they feel is a place that's losing its heritage. And I mean, do you feel that, I feel that that's what is coming through in your writing, is that you're still quite proud of where you're from despite everything.
Yeah, I'm Cornish, you know, born and raised. We're an ethnic minority, which a lot of people who visit Cornwall don't even realise. You know, we're more similar to the Bretons in France than we are with anyone in, you know, with the English. But of course we're proud, you know, and we're happy. We love people. We want people to come down to Cornwall and enjoy Cornwall. But it's that kind of taking over of the you know, the folklore and the stories and the celebrations. And our celebrations were Celts, so our celebrations are quite kind of mucky and messy, you know, and they make it all kind of very pretty and clean and clinical, and we should do, and it's like, well, that's not how these things are done. So I'm very aware of our traditions, and I think people, you know, come down and enjoy our traditions, and you know, I'm not against tourism at all. I think it needs to be managed better, but I don't blame tourists for coming down or going anywhere, but they have to maybe go to different areas, not look at the guidebook and say, oh, we're going to go to this certain place because that's where everybody goes. Perhaps go off the beaten track a little bit. And don't stay in Airbnbs because they're completely unregulated. Stay in holiday parks because they can be 5-star. You can stay in a really nice caravan. You know, it's that sort of thing. It's just having a little bit more thought to tourism. And then the second homes, we just need to tax them. Tax them, you know, 1,000%, and then maybe we'll get somewhere. That's a different story, because people often tourism, second homes, they put them in the same basket, and they're not. You know, tourism is our second biggest kind of trade. That's tourism's cool. That's fine. It's the second homes that we have a massive problem with. Yeah.
I mean, I think that idea of figuring out what's changed is really crucial to the memoir as well, isn't it? And especially in yours as well, that there's a sense of you returning to the scene of the crime, as it were, to the place where all this foundation stones got put down, and trying to figure it out. And that, I think that's a story that lots of writers, but lots of people that have moved away from their homelands and come back and seen it with fresh eyes share as well. So again, you've got these sort of twin heads going at it with the personal and the political working nicely together there. And I think that splinters out in really interesting ways in the memoir as well. And one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was voice and the different voices that are in the piece. I said to Lisa earlier today, actually, that you can tell that this is a memoir that was written by a poet, and a novelist, and an essayist, and I don't know what to call you, a conservationist, naturalist. But all of this weaving of different voices seems natural terrain for the memoir as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think firstly, yeah, the fact that I've written so many different in so many different ways, which I think all writers should do. I think it's incredible if somebody just finds, one way of writing and they're happy there, because for me, I want to do all of it and at different times and mix them up. And, I just love writing and I love words. So for me, I couldn't have written this memoir any earlier in my career, because I think my fiction writing, poetry writing has lent itself to writing this, because like putting in dialogue, I found that really easy. And I know a lot of non-fiction writers probably wouldn't find that easy, but I love doing that. And I thought it really, really broke up certain chapters, because then you've just got these young people having conversations like around the beach, getting drunk around a beach fire and that sort of thing. I don't want to be, I'm the voice, I'm the narrator the whole time. I want people to just see these characters and have these little moments away from me and my story. It's my vision, it's my memory, but I want people to just kind of forget about me a little bit while they're reading Undercurrent, so they can see these scenes and hear these people speak, and also hear the dialect as well, the Cornish dialect, which is always really important for me in my writing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of regional writing is one of the things that we're mad passionate about at Wolverhampton anyway, and dialect writing in particular. So I was, and I've got quite a lot of family down in Cornwall as well. So it was really lovely for me to read and think of my cousins.
It's so important. It's so important, and publishing for so long, I hear so many stories of writers being told to write their voice out of their fiction and out of their poetry. And it's just, it's the beauty of this country. We have so many beautiful accents, and ways of speaking that are just poetry. And I just think it's such a shame. I think they are getting better, but I'm not sure how much better. I think they struggle. I mean, I think a Scottish accent now, they're like, okay, they can manage that because that's been successful a couple of times with a couple of writers. So, but I think, it's better. It's rich texture to hear different accents from different areas. That's the whole point. Yeah.
Can I just interject there, Natasha, actually, because I mean, you've been publishing for a very long time, and you've been working in various different mediums, but as I say, I think you've been incredibly true to your voice, and you haven't kind of written for publication, you've written for you. I mean, how's that kind of publishing journey been for you from the beginning to where you are now? Has it been hard going to kind of keep being true to yourself and maintaining that sort of decisiveness and that determination in terms of writing what you want to do, or do you feel like you've been able to be quite free with what you're doing? I've
always been very free. I think I was it's not luck, but if you just get that one editor that likes the way you write. So with my first fiction, which was with Bloomsbury, and it was for young adult, but it just worked. So I got my voice and I got my kind of brand in a way, which is this working class Cornish country writer, and I wouldn't want to be any other way. So I've with fiction and literary fiction with Quercus, but then with poetry with smaller publications in between, because for me it's about writing and going forward. It's not always about hitting those marks with those big publishers necessarily. It's literally about finding the right publisher for the right work. So yeah, I've kind of been lucky, but I know a lot of writers haven't been so lucky with their, and it literally, it's the luck part is who gets to read your work. The luck part is who gets to see your book on submission, and then they match the right editor. Yeah, I was really lucky with Undercurrent. The first time of all my books that it's actually gone to auction, which that's never happened with any of my books. So you know what it's like. You're like one person, and you're like, yay, brilliant. And so to have a few people kind of interviewing me about my memoir was quite surreal, because naturally, also because working class, I'm a little bit kind of grateful for the world I'm in. But yeah, my editor at Coronet Hodder was absolutely brilliant, and I knew immediately that she was the right one. So again, it's it's not so much luck, but it's just the right person for the right book. I mean, she might not have been working at the time, she might have been busy with something else, you know, and then that wouldn't have happened, and it would have been a very different book.
Yeah. I mean, because the working class moniker, I mean, you know, you and I have done various similar things, haven't we, over the years, and sometimes people kind of want that label, sometimes you're asked to defend that label. You guest edited The Bookseller, which for some of the students that are tuned in is basically the local rag for publishing, isn't it, really, for want of a better phrase? But you had the opportunity of guest editing it, and you did it from that working class perspective. I mean, how was that, and what did it achieve for you?
Oh, it achieved so much. I mean, I was so excited to do it and I had no idea, I have no experience of magazine editorial, and I didn't realize that whatever I said, whoever I picked to do different articles and opinion pieces and stuff, that was fine. Like, I literally had complete freedom. So it was brilliant, because it was like doing the festival, the class festival that I did in 2021. I just looked at all the writers I knew, all the working class writers I knew, and then I tried to think about the ones I didn't know. So I was very much about, on social media, throwing my net wide and seeing who's got books out, because the best bit was about getting all the books together for the full year to say who's got books out, whether it's children's, poetry, young adult fiction. So that was really, really exciting to see all these brilliant names coming in, and also names that I hadn't seen. And people get in contact with me saying, you know, I'm a working class writer, and I hadn't realized. So that was, I got to know a lot of new writers, but it was also really important to get people, writers, to put their opinions of the industry, and not just from the working class rainbow, but, you know, people of color, gay, trans. I just wanted to kind of just get as many people's perspective as possible, because for me, it's all about the readership. And that was my one chance, you know, to get as many kind of names in there. And then also the publishing industry. So I had editors, agents contacting me quite a lot, saying they really wanted to say their stories, you know, more than I thought. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant, because what has been in the industry is people are expected in publishing to be a certain way and to assimilate quite quickly. So everyone's the same in publishing. And those were the stories people were saying to me. They were like, I'm an editor and I feel like I'm really kind of alienated. And by doing that, I brought those people together. So once The Bookseller came out, more and more people started to connect with each other and set up kind of industry groups that were people from low social economic backgrounds that could then get together and join forces, which, like, as you know, we are part of the same family. You know, we've joined forces, and we have this incredible working class family of people, and there's thousands of us that are published, but we help each other, you know, and we talk to each other and we give each other a lift up, which is unique to us working class writers, I think.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that seems to be happening in the last few years, really, in terms of class in literature as well, and your work certainly a part of this, and indeed Lisa, and the work that Kit Duvall has been doing with Common People and projects like this is, well, and to pick up on what you were just saying, is that there's a particular stereotype of what we expect the publishing world to be populated by, that's not necessarily true. And also, I think there's a particular type of working class that the publishing world thinks the working classes are as well. And I think one of the things that you guys have done, and Kit, like I say, is open that conversation further and say, well, actually, there's a huge diversity and wild intersection of these different things, these different class identities, which I think's really, really important to broadening that conversation out as well, and that in turn allows for the you know, for want of a better phrase, the market to kind of catch up with what real life is actually like.
Exactly, you know, and I say this at festivals quite a lot, is we don't just talk about miserable things, you know, we talk about community, we talk about connectability, we talk about, like Lisa, you know, is a writer that doesn't write about just miserable, you know, it's not poverty porn, or, you know, it's that kind of thing. We can talk about communities and the rich tapestry of our upbringings, and the music and the art and the laughter and the generosity, definitely. So, and I think people are starting to realize that, you know, we don't just write about, you know, boohoo, wasn't my life bad? Because with Undercurrent, of course, I went through a lot of sadness and trauma, but it's about resilience, and it's about getting at the end and saying, look, I'm you know, a well-known writer, and I did that, you know, and it's hard work, but you can do it. And I also try to tell people that it's easy to talk about the things that we don't have, and how the unfairness of a lot of people have money and a lot of us don't. But that's what can you do about it? If you can't change that, you have to then just look at the positives and see what you can do with what you've got, with the tools you've got and the gifts that you've been given by your community or your family or whatever. Because then you can move forward. You know, there's so many doors you can kick in, but some you can't, and you just have to move on.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's reflected throughout the memoir, and it, you know, it's undercut, I suppose, with the subtitle as well, isn't it? Really, Natasha, you know, it's called Undercurrent, a Cornish memoir of poverty, nature, and resilience. So it's not just a memoir of you. It's not just about the undercurrents of life and culture. It's a Cornish memoir, so it's place and culture specific in that sense, of poverty, nature, and resilience. So all of these things are coming into play.
Yeah, and the nature part is so huge for me in this book, because that really was my savior in many ways, was nature, just getting out in nature if you want to just
and it
get
seems
away.
to continue to be a source of like important reflection for you as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very important. Yeah.
Is it true that you write outside all the time?
Yeah, I've written
like
everything outside.
Google Facts, isn't it? when I've read interviews by you, you know, when I've seen you at events and festivals, you often say that you actually physically go and write outside. So rather than at a desk, it's part of your process.
Yeah, it's part of my process. It's just, you know, it's a freeing up of the mind, because if you leave your phone and your laptop, I always say that we're always looking through windows, we're looking through screens, computers, phones, whatever. So you get rid of all that. It's just you and your pad. Yeah. And I know people are like, oh my God, what if you lose your pet? I haven't yet, but you know, it's just that wildness of just that physical act of pen on paper, and then the inspiration that you have around you is just it's there. It's so important to just be in the wild, and you don't have to be in the wild. You can be in a park, or you can be on a roof of a tower block, if you know, wherever you like. That's wild writing, because that's you're in the wilderness, you're in the wilds of life. I
must admit, when I read the book as if it felt quite tidal to me. You know, I mean, I know you kind of talk about in the ocean is there, and you've just sort of talked in that prologue as if you're kind of looking out all the time. You know, you're looking at, you just said, the continents of me. I'm looking for me, as if it's out there, but it's all at sea, and you can't quite get at it. I mean, is that sort of purposeful analogy that you're using throughout?
Yeah, for me, like the cover, when we came up with the cover, the reason I loved it so much is because that to me is the rock pool. When you're really young and you're playing in the rock pools, and you're just looking down and you're looking at these little, you know, this little boat you've made out of flotsam with a little fist packet, you know, sail and a couple of winkles, you know, pretending they're little people. And then you get that moment when you look up, and then that cover then to me was like it's the horizon. And you have that moment when you're like, I no longer want to look down into this little world. I want to look out there. And you know, it is in the book, once I looked at the horizon, and I was like, yes, I want more. I want to know what's out there, because all I knew was this little stretch of cliff and beach, the little bit of water, the rocks, and there was a village over there and a village over there, but you never really visit anywhere because we didn't have a car, so you're literally in your village.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, once you start thinking, like any young person, wherever you are, once you start thinking beyond the horizon, then you've got to kind of explore the world around you.
Well, you're certainly influencing people here. I'm so going to try and immerse myself in the outside to right, says Teresa.
Good, good. I was going to say, I want my students to underline that section of this interview as well. Yeah, I mean, the other thing with that sense of looking up and thinking, I need to explore and see what's beyond here, what's beyond the rock pools. There's something daunting about that as well, isn't there? That I think you capture beautifully in the memoir too. That what on the face of it might look like exciting and sort of self-expanding places and adventures. Underneath that, there's undercurrents and swirling things that might suck you under. I remember the passages around the autumn tide that leaves nothing in its wake or something like that. And again, the book has got that sense of adventure about it, but also that sense of like potential threats and dangers as well, hasn't it?
But that is adventure, isn't it? When it's the unknown, when you don't know, and especially when you're young and then you're a teen and you're allowed to go a little bit further and you start walking and you start kind of meeting different people, then it's fun and it is adventure. But yeah, it's full of trepidation as well. And for me, because my school was 10 miles away, so it was a 20-mile round trip. If you were ever going to go and stay with a friend or whatever, you would be out of sight, out of mind. My mum would, I'll tell her who the parent was that I'm staying with, and but they don't know. I mean, a lot of us from my generation coming from the country, you were trusted to kind of be good, and it didn't necessarily mean you were going to be, because you were like 14, 15, 16, so yeah, we would have these adventures and you'd go off, but who knew where we were and what we were doing? Because I was 10 miles away. I wasn't just around the corner. I wasn't just going to come home after whatever, going to the cinema, which not that we did. We were always just out partying or whatever. But, but yeah, the adventure, definitely that flip side of the adventure was a lot of dodgy situations, shall we say.
How much of all that adventure do you think informs your YA fiction? Because I mean, that's really what you became known for, wasn't it? And from what I hear from fellow people who I know write YA, it's a really tricky genre to negotiate. Even down to the actual use of vocabulary is so nitpicked. I mean, I know there's quite a few of our students here tuning in now and very interested in writing in this genre. I mean, what's your advice in that area?
Well, my first book, Winter Damage, my first fiction, a few poetry before that, I didn't know it was going to be YA. I just wrote it and we got it. My agent pitched it to a couple of fiction editors, YA and adult. And it was that moment where, this was like 10 years ago, and it was a moment where YA was really coming into its own and it was starting to be wild, like literally really wild stories. Like Winter Damage is a really kind of a tough story. It's dystopia, which I didn't even know the word when it came out. But I was told to take out the swearing, so that's my advice. We had 50 F words in it that had to come out.
All had to go.
All of a sudden, it was perfect for YA. Just a little less swearing. But I think with YA, try not to think of it as a genre. Write the story you want to write. Obviously, you'll have a young protagonist, but then maybe kind of curtail it a little bit. But I think nowadays it's such a popular genre that it's better to write from the heart, write what you want to write, and then submit it as YA, because why not? Because YA technically is people up to the age of 30 read YA, so it's not as if it's not really, and we classed as like for 14-year-olds. It's not really, it's people up to 30 kind of read it. So
Yeah, a lot of it is for marketing purposes, isn't it? But I mean,
Oh,
as,
yeah.
as a writer, you know, you kind of start thinking about ideas. Do you think in medium first, in genre, or this is going to be this, or this is going to be that, or do you just start writing and see where it takes you?
Just write it, see where it takes me. Yeah, because otherwise, you know, writing should be free. You know, and you're putting too much on yourself already. Just write it for yourself. Go completely mad with it, and then fit somewhere. You know, and if you haven't got an agent, which probably most of your students probably still don't.
Yeah.
Write it for yourself, and then just pitch it out to agents who you see kind of publishing similar things, but. Yeah, absolutely, write it for yourself, because otherwise you're gonna not be able to do it, because you think, oh, that's I need to have all these things in place, which means YA. Don't just write from the heart, write what you want. Yeah.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll start with the anonymous, who says, I've come to writing more seriously at a late age. I mean, that doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter when you come to write it, you know, don't worry about anything like that. I didn't know I could until I tried. Listen to several authors on their publishing journeys, and many have had a lucky break by knowing someone or being in the right place at the right time. What would be your advice to get out there and be heard?
You need to know right from the beginning that there is that massive unfairness. I talk about this all the time, and it's often not it's not so unfair when you get an agent. If an agent likes your book, they don't care where you're from, they don't care your age, they don't care your background. It's the same with editors, you know, to a certain extent. I find, and even still, it's who you know. So you might not get in a certain magazine or a certain paper because you didn't go to uni with, or your dad didn't go to Oxford with, you know, and it's that unfairness will always be there, but you've got to find your people. And especially there's a new prize I think came out, I was reading about it in the bookseller earlier today, but women over their 50s for the debut writers, you know. So they're seeing these holes, and they're thinking, right, okay, where is there a gap? Because a lot of people in their 50s, especially women in their 60s and beyond, are writing brilliant stories, because it is all about what we've gathered and what we've read in our lives. You know, it really doesn't matter your age, but you've got to my advice is just forget all that and write the best story you can and pitch it out.
Just write it.
Yeah.
And another one, which is kind of taking you back really to the whole experience, well, the whole nature writing experience. This is from Callum. Very interesting, since nature is fantastic for escapism, and Cornwall an ideal location, being a historically Celtic based location. How immersive do you like to take this?
Oh, well, just, yeah, leave your phone and just be on a rock in the middle of the splashy ocean. That's how I started writing, was being kind of really angry and running away from an argument, and just not understanding what was going on. And I just had this moment standing on the rocks with my anger going one way, and the ocean and the sea spray coming back over me, and just having that moment when this is what this is, this, whatever this feeling is, which is creativity and being a writer. That amalgamation was like, oh yeah, and then I knew what writing was. But yeah, absolutely be out, and you know, sometimes write with a pencil, not with a pen, because the pen won't work when it's pouring rain and you're being passionate and mad. You know, sit under a tree and write, and just completely get out there. I know when I wrote All Rivers Run Free, which was my lit fic with Quercus, just I had this moment of sitting by a river and writing about the young girl in the boat, and trying to imagine how she felt, and then not having to imagine anymore, because I was the one who was soaking wet, freezing cold, and my eyes were, you know, full of rainwater. And then I was like, then I was just writing as her, as opposed to what is it like, you know, you're like, this is what it's like, because I'm freezing cold and soaking wet, completely mad.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that impulse is something about your heritage as well, Natasha. You know, you mentioned the sort of Cornish Celtic culture being mucky.
Yeah.
And of course, there's an elemental quality in the memoir as well, with it being broken down into the different elements of the the natural elements for the chapter sections as well. Maybe that's part of the drive there to.
Yeah, maybe it's the pagan inside of me that just wants to. Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, and doesn't it quite prove as well that actually what is out on your doorstep is material? Do you find though that you're reading the landscape, that natural landscape, differently as you get older, and as you're kind of better negotiating the publishing landscape too? Do you know what I mean? You know, when you're kind of first start out, do you feel like you're kind of drawing on things? I don't know, you're trying to sort of be as allegorical as possible, or you're really trying to sort of push the metaphors, etc. And the more you kind of sort of realize how much you know that landscape and how much it is embroidered in your own identity.
It is, because you're not wondering. You're not wondering what something's like anymore. You just are. There's nothing worse than bad metaphors, because people think, oh, what is something like? I kind of, I've never really asked that question, because you just know what it's like. It's easy when people start off writing to try to fall into, a lake or a river is like a mirror or glass. And is it though? That's the question. Is it though? Like I take people out over the years to do wild writing, and I get them to do a kind of a sensory, a list of words, and use their sensory. Sometimes we step outside, and I get them to step outside a building with their eyes closed. So we start off a whole bit of writing and conversation about what your experience is without one of your senses, because everyone's like, what does something look like? That's the immediate go-to, and I'm always like, use your ears, use your sense of smell, use your taste, lick it, whatever, lick that tree. And that's what it's like though, because then those things are more like, they're not how you think at all. And and publishing as well, it's you think publishing a certain way, and people talk about gatekeepers, and I don't think they are gatekeepers, and I do fight against that a little bit, because I think that's editors and agents want people to write. They want to read people's books. They're not just like shut down and they just want to read posh people's manuscripts or whatever. Sometimes those things slip in if someone knows someone, but they really are trying. And I think since I started banging this class festival drum, which was like 7 years ago actually, when I talked about it in The Guardian, the more books are being published and more different stories are being published. But it is really easy sometimes for people to think, oh, my work is not going to get published because of the gatekeepers. Yeah. Well, it's not. You've got to just rewrite and rework on your work. It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. There's a lot of us around, there's a lot of writers around, but don't take no for an answer, and rewrite and listen to advice. Because
do you think that's a recent change, Natasha? Or
it is definitely a recent change. Okay. Because these books are being published and they are being bought, and they're different stories and they're different writers from different parts of the country. So it's just about, everyone in publishing needs to remind themselves of not to fall into that little circle of influence that we can all be in, and you just look, oh, who's the working class writer in this circle who, oh, we're publishing one, that'll do. That's not good enough. You have to keep looking at all the different stories, and not just thinking, oh, because one type of memoir or a book about a poor lad in Scotland is going to be okay. We'll just keep publishing those kind of books. You want to be publishing more, and also more women. There does need to be more books published by working class women, for sure. Yeah, because they're still then falling into the working class men, and that ticks the box. And I'm like, no, it doesn't tick the box. That ticks a small box. There's a lot of other boxes you can tick.
It's about time we had a heyday as well, isn't it, really?
Exactly. Yeah.
In the 60s with Solitaire, etc. I mean, definitely, as we kind of enter those last 5 minutes, and before we kind of hand over, ask you to do one more reading for us, let's give a plug to your Working Class Festival, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. I mean, when things don't exist, we have to invent them, and you certainly did. Just a little potted history of why you did this. I mean, it's entering, is it its third year next year?
It'll be third year next year. Yeah. This year because of Undercurrent and touring, I've had to kind of take the year out. But last year, we are doing events this year. We just did one in London Book Fair, and we will be buddying up with a few different people later in the year for workshops and things. Last year I toured with it, and the year before, yeah, it was our first year in Bristol. But the reason I set it up was just, it came out of fairness. It came out of a tweet where I was just like, I'd been to a festival and I was like, I wasn't asked if I wanted to be paid. Well, yes, please, I do. I wasn't asked if I needed train fare or hotel. It was just, and that happened a lot. And there was just one moment when I was like, I was touring with All Rivers Run Free, and I just thought, this is just ridiculous, because I shouldn't have to ask. People pay their bar staff before they pay writers, and yet without writers, we wouldn't have festivals. So I put up this tweet, yay, we need a festival of our own. You probably remember it, Lisa, and everyone was like, yeah, brilliant, yeah, great idea. And then everyone just stopped, and then it was almost like just 1,000 eyes looking at me. And I thought that maybe a few people would say, oh, I could think of this. I said, well, what about this idea? Nobody did. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to do it. Yeah. So that's where it came from. Fairness, everybody paid the same, whether you're Val McDermott, whether you've got a chapbook out, everybody in between got the same payment. Everybody got offered train fare, bus fare, hotel. So that's where it came from, because what I was seeing at these festivals were on stage with the same white middle-class people talking about their books, because they could get there for free. You know, they could go to these festivals without having to take a day off work. They didn't have to worry about childcare. So they just rocked up at festivals, and it was just the same people reading the same books. And I was just like, where were the working class people? Where were the poor people? You know, that's basically what it was. So then this festival came about, and it's about representation. It's about young people. We weren't just in the centre of Bristol. We went to a few different areas as well, local library and community centres. So we were going into the communities so people could see these incredible working class writers, online events as well. And then that representation made a lot of people think, okay, you know, I can do it. Yeah. And also people saw writers that they'd never heard of before, and who were incredible writers. So it was important to give that platform to so many people. Yeah. Yeah. It's excellent.
Yeah. And you've mentioned Twitter quite a bit. I put a tweet out. I've done this. I put a tweet out. You're prolific on social media. Quite frankly, I don't know how you find the time to do all this and then tweet as much as you do. Social media, I mean, we do rather hammer it, particularly to our final year students, about getting that online presence, building that online profile, because it is so important, and also for networking and to following publishers, following agents. I mean, has it been a real lifeline for you? Has it been able to, you know, sell books, find readers, get all these projects off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Find readers, and also for me to find books and writers. You know, we all, our community as working class writers is very strong. And then we have, because you have a publisher or you have an agent just come, you know, DMs you and comes out of the woodwork and says, do you want to do this? And that's absolutely what it is. I mean, publishers, they're all on Twitter. That's their thing more than Instagram. They're all doing business, you know. And there's an often, like my my agent, which is Blake Friedman Literary Agency, and my agent is Juliet Pickering, which is a well-known agent, but they do often an Ask the Agent.
Yes, they do, yeah.
You know, once a month or once every couple of months. And that's absolutely brilliant, because they literally have that hashtag between a couple of hours, and anyone can ask this brilliant, you know, agency all the questions you like. And again, that's about transparency. And they will answer you, you know, as best they can. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Okay, as we're kind of coming towards the end, aren't we? 5 to 8. I don't know whether or not there's any last minute questions. I mean, you've given me lots of inspiration, Natasha, to persevere and to not be afraid to try something new. I think if we take anything away from this session, I think that's certainly that. But have you got something that you could sort of culminate this conversation with from Undercurrent? Another quick burst.
I will. Just a short paragraph from from near the end, I think. It's the second to last segment, but I think it's yeah, it's kind of apt. Get my glasses on. Often poverty is not a tsunami, but an incoming tide of tiny waves. They hit and they hit until finally you are overwhelmed with water. And with little option, you struggle to keep afloat. Your head above water, trying to think of all the ways to make some cash so you might survive the next breaker crash. Hoping that at one point you might witness the dark in its final dawn retreat, breaking through and the glimmer of something close to hope.
Beautiful. That's a really nice place to close, I think. So once again, let me thank everyone for tuning in and joining us this evening. And a huge thanks to Natasha for sharing your ideas and sharing your words, and for just keep on doing what you're doing. You're a force of nature, and we thank you for it, because it's not just in your writing, but in all the other activities that you're doing as well. And please, those that are listening, go and get Undercurrent. You know, this weaving of different voices, this weaving of different ideas, all in this beautiful swirl, is worth getting your teeth into.
That's brilliant, Rob. Thank you. And thank you, Lisa. Some brilliant questions.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Natasha.
No
It's
worries.
an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you on the road somewhere.
No, absolutely. And anyone wants to come and get in contact with me, at Natasha Carthew on Twitter. Yay.
Do follow Natasha. Brilliant. She teaches me how I should behave on Twitter. So thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night. Thank you.
See you again.
Bye.
Bye.